I chose 7 more days of holding Robert's hand instead of keeping a roof over my head. An 80-year-old widow steps into Judge Judy's courtroom for what seems like an ordinary small claims case over $2,541 in unpaid rent. She wears a neatly pressed floral dress, holds a weathered leather purse tightly to her chest, and moves carefully with a wooden cane. Her hands shake as she lowers herself into the defendant's seat, her eyes swollen and red from days of crying. This is Margaret Sullivan, and within moments, she will reveal something so painful, so devastating, that Judge Judy will respond in a way she never has in 28 years on television. She will rise from her bench, walk away in silence, and everyone present will understand this is no longer a simple legal dispute. It is something far deeper. A heartbreaking glimpse into the harsh realities of a system that forces impossible choices on the elderly every day. The plaintiff is 62-year-old David Morrison, owner of a modest 12-unit apartment building in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. But his connection to Margaret runs far deeper than landlord and tenant. For more than 50 years, David was the closest friend of Margaret's late husband, Robert. They fought side by side in Vietnam in 1968, survived together, and returned home together. For 43 years, Margaret and Robert lived in David's building, paying rent faithfully every month without exception. Until 3 months ago. 3 months ago, the payments stopped. Margaret stopped answering calls. She didn't respond when David knocked on her door. And now, despite decades of friendship, David finds himself suing the widow of his best friend. What no one in that courtroom knows yet, not even David, is why Margaret stopped paying. And when the truth finally comes out, it will leave no one untouched. Margaret and Robert Sullivan met in 1964 at a church gathering in Brooklyn. She was 22, a young schoolteacher full of hope. He was 24, working for the Postal Service and slowly building a stable future. They fell in love over shared dreams of a simple, honest life. They married the following year in a small ceremony. For 58 years they built that life together. Margaret taught second grade for 35 years, shaping young minds. Robert delivered mail for 4 decades, no matter the weather. They lived modestly, never spending beyond their means. They saved diligently, drove the same car for years, and took simple vacations. Over time, they built a retirement fund of $127,000. Not a fortune, but enough to feel secure. They endured loss together. Their daughter Sarah died in a car accident in 1998, nearly breaking them. Their son Michael moved to California, and distance slowly strained their relationship. Grandchildren grew up far away. But through everything, Margaret and Robert had each other. Their 1-bedroom, rent-controlled apartment, $847 a month, was filled with memories of their life together. And David Morrison, more like family than a landlord, always treated them with care and respect. Then, 18 months ago, everything changed. Robert was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Doctors gave him 6 months, maybe 9 at most. There was an experimental treatment available, one not covered by Medicare or insurance. It wasn't guaranteed, but it offered hope. It cost $8,400 a month. Margaret looked at the man she had loved for nearly 6 decades and made a decision. She chose time over money. She chose her husband over their savings. She chose love over security, never imagining where that choice would lead. For 16 months, she paid for the treatment. Every month, $8,400. She watched their savings shrink, $120,000, then $100,000, then less and less, until nothing remained. But Robert was still there, still holding her hand. When the money ran out, she turned to credit cards. 5 of them. She maxed each one, accumulating $31,000 in debt, just to keep the treatments going. Then came the moment she could never forget. 3 months ago, Margaret had exactly $847 left. Enough for one thing, rent or treatment. Not both. Sitting at their kitchen table, she made her choice. She paid for the treatment. She chose her husband over her home. And she made that same choice again the following month. And again after that. She heard David knocking. She saw the notices piling up. But she couldn't face him. She couldn't explain that she was willingly risking homelessness just to keep Robert alive a little longer. 8 weeks ago, Robert passed away in their bedroom, with Margaret holding his hand. He lived 7 months longer than expected. 7 months that cost everything. Now Margaret sits in court, facing the loss of the only home she has known for over 4 decades. Judge Judy looks up from her notes, her expression composed but attentive. The courtroom is full. David Morrison sits across from Margaret, clearly uneasy. When the case begins, Judge Judy addresses him. Mr. Morrison, you're suing Mrs. Sullivan for $2,541 in unpaid rent and requesting possession of the apartment. Explain. David rises slowly, his voice heavy with emotion. He speaks of their history, their friendship, his attempts to reach her, and his own financial pressures. Judge Judy listens, then turns to Margaret. Mrs. Sullivan, what's your response? Margaret struggles to speak. Tears fall silently. Finally, she whispers, my husband died. The room shifts. Even David looks stunned. Judge Judy leans forward gently. When did he pass? 8 weeks ago. Judge Judy nods with sympathy, but presses further. You stopped paying 3 months ago. What happened then? Margaret takes a breath, her voice trembling at first, then going steadier as she tells her story. She explains the diagnosis, the treatment, the cost, the savings they spent, the debt she took on, the impossible choice she faced. How do you tell the person you've loved for 58 years that they're not worth the money? She asks. How do you choose savings over your husband? The courtroom falls completely silent. She describes watching their life savings disappear, month by month, while Robert gained time. Time to hold her hand. Time to say, I love you. She explains the moment she chose treatment over rent. I chose my husband, she says, looking directly at the judge. I chose 7 more days with him instead of keeping a roof over my head. Tears fill the courtroom. Even David Morrison covers his mouth, overcome. Margaret continues, her voice breaking. After everything, after spending everything, he lived 7 more months. 7 months. And I spent every day beside him, making sure he wasn't afraid, making sure he wasn't alone. She pauses. So yes, I owe the money, but I have nothing left. I'm 80 years old. I'm alone, and soon I'll be homeless. But I would do it all again. For the first time in 28 years, Judge Judy says nothing. She sits still, eyes glistening, then slowly removes her glasses. The silence is overwhelming. Then, without a word, she stands. The courtroom freezes. Judge Judy steps down from the bench and walks toward Margaret. She gently places a hand on her shoulder. Mrs. Sullivan, she says softly, look at me. Margaret lifts her tear-filled eyes. In all my years on this bench, I've heard every excuse there is. But what you've told me, this isn't an excuse. It's a tragedy. She turns to David. Mr. Morrison, if your best friend were here, if Robert had spent everything to save Margaret, what would you have done? David doesn't hesitate. I would have told him to forget the rent. He was my brother. He turns to Margaret, tears streaming. Why didn't you tell me? I would have helped. Margaret whispers, I was ashamed. Judge Judy's voice becomes firm. You didn't fail. The system failed you. No one should have to choose between saving a life and keeping a home. She looks at Margaret with quiet respect. What you did, that's love.